Some people say Anne Heche died in that fire. Others say she never made it to the hospital alive. But the truth is far older and far darker than any headline they printed afterward. Because before the crash, before the flames, Anne was being followed, not by paparazzi, not by drugs or trauma, but by someone who once owned pieces of her life the rest of the world never saw. And I know that because I was there, inside the facility where they kept her hidden, watching the way Ellen's shadow moved through those halls, long before the cameras ever did. This was the scariest time of my life, the closest I've ever been to fear wearing a human face. And everything that happened next began the moment Anne whispered one truth the world was never meant to hear. I remember who she is. They don't advertise the place. There's no website, no brochure, no wellness influencers bragging about it on Instagram. The entrance is a narrow turnoff from a Malibu Canyon road, easy to miss unless you know exactly where to look. A faded wooden sign reads private property, but that's a distraction. The real gate is 100 yards deeper, hidden beneath the branches of 2 old cypress trees. That's where the guards stand, not security guards, handlers dressed in slate gray uniforms, no name tags, no insignia. They all carry the same blank expression, the same radio clipped to the same hip. Their job is simple: keep people out and keep certain people very, very in. I used to drive past that turnoff every morning after my shift, wondering who the hell would build a mental health facility this deep in the mountains. Back then, I still thought of it as a hospital, a private one maybe, or a retreat for celebrities who needed to recalibrate, which was the word they used during my onboarding. It took one night for me to realize how wrong that was. The compound itself feels like it's holding its breath. Beige floors, teal-tinted lights, digital waterfalls looping on every wall. A soft hum vibrates through every hallway. A low, steady frequency you stop noticing after the first week. They pipe eucalyptus into the vents to keep guests calm, though it always made me feel strangely detached, like my thoughts were being muffled. I worked nights, level 3 East. 32 years old, no degree, no family calling to check in. I wasn't looking to save the world. I just needed the money. My mother had a stroke the year before, and the medical bills piled up like sandbags around my neck. Renewal Wing doubled what I made anywhere else. They didn't care about my past or my lack of qualifications. They only cared that I signed the NDA and didn't ask questions, so I didn't. Most nights were quiet. Guests paced, some whispered to no one, some looked through you as if trying to remember your face. I told myself it was trauma, detox, exhaustion, anything but what it actually was. Then they brought her in. It was 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was logging vitals when the South Gate alarm chimed softly on my monitor. That gate is never used. It has no cameras by design, only motion sensors and a single code known by upper staff. But a vehicle had entered. I stepped into the hallway just as 2 handlers rushed past, guiding someone between them. No stretcher, no wheelchair. She walked on her own feet, barefoot, wobbling slightly but refusing to fall. Anne Heche. She wore a pale linen gown, the kind the facility gives to new intakes. Her hair hung in tangled strands over her cheeks. There were bruises along her forearms, but her posture told a different story. Shoulders stiff, chin lifted, eyes darting around the room like she was trying to memorize every exit. They logged her as guest 7. She didn't look broken. She looked furious. One handler tried to steady her, but she jerked her arm away and spat out the first words I ever heard her say. I remember everything. Her voice was hoarse from screaming or lack of sleep. Maybe both. They led her to room 7, the isolation suite at the far end of the East Wing. I watched from behind the observation glass. She paced for hours, ignoring water, ignoring sedation, ignoring the cameras entirely. Sometimes she spoke under her breath, too soft for the mics to catch. I could only read fragments on her lips. She thinks I forgot. She thinks she can overwrite me. I saw the second one. I assumed she meant someone she knew, a partner, a friend, a double cross. Celebrities always had drama. It wasn't my place to interpret any of it. But later, during log review, the audio caught one sentence clearly. Quiet, exhausted, spoken to no one. She thinks I didn't see the sub-level. She thinks I didn't see her twice. I replayed it 3 times. Twice. I didn't understand what she meant until days later. 3 nights after her arrival, something changed. I was doing rounds when the elevator at the far west end chimed, a sound I had never heard before. That elevator didn't exist on the map they gave us. It was sealed behind a door labeled authorized entry only. I'd never once seen it open. But that night, it did. 2 figures stepped out. Anne and Ellen DeGeneres. Ellen wore black scrubs with no badge, her blonde hair pulled tight behind her head. She walked like someone who owned the entire building. Not visiting, not comforting, but inspecting. Her hand rested lightly on Anne's shoulder, guiding her forward with a softness that didn't match the fear in Anne's eyes. They passed directly in front of me. Anne looked away. Ellen didn't. Her gaze locked onto mine, sharp and cold, as if she'd been expecting me. For a split second, just long enough for my breath to catch, her eyes flickered dark, black, completely black. Then the moment passed, and she continued down the corridor with Anne beside her, toward the door no staff ever entered, the door to reconditioning. The sign above it lit up. Memory stabilization in progress. I stood frozen in the hallway long after they disappeared behind the double doors. That was the night I realized the truth. This place wasn't about healing. It was about rewriting people. And Anne was next. 2 nights passed before I saw them again. I'd spent those days pretending everything was normal, pretending I hadn't watched Ellen DeGeneres walk a bruised, sleep-deprived Anne Heche into a room no guest ever came out of the same. I convinced myself it wasn't my business, that this place had its own rules, its own rhythms, and I'd be a fool to get caught between them. But when I clocked in again for my shift, something felt off. The air was heavier. The lights were dimmer. The building felt aware. At 12:47 a.m., I saw them. Anne, walking slowly down the hallway again, barefoot this time, shoulders hunched, as if gravity itself was punishing her. And beside her, perfectly calm, perfectly composed, was Ellen. No handlers, no escort team, just the 2 of them. The closer they walked, the more wrong it looked. Ellen's hand rested lightly on Anne's back, not comforting, not guiding, steering. Anne didn't fight it. She didn't speak. But her jaw was tight, her eyes flickering like someone silently battling a reality she didn't agree to. They were heading to room D7 again, the reconciliation wing. My heart dropped into my stomach. I shouldn't follow them. I knew that, but something in me refused to look away. I waited until they disappeared behind the double doors, then slipped into a small utility room across from the wing entrance. It was cramped, filled with disinfectant carts, boxes of scrubs, and a metal crate stacked under a large ventilation grate. I remembered this vent from training. If you hear anything through this shaft, my supervisor had said, ignore it. Privacy regulations. Privacy, sure. I climbed onto the crate, which creaked under my weight, and pressed my face close to the metal slats. Through the gaps, I could see part of the room. Anne was seated in a metal chair, hands clasped between her knees. Her hair was tangled, damp. Her eyes were swollen, but there was something alive in her still, something sharp. Ellen stood 3 feet away, her posture relaxed, her face expressionless. Then she began. Her voice was soft, too soft, the kind of softness people use right before doing something cruel. Do you remember our relationship? Anne didn't answer. Ellen repeated it. Exact same tone, exact same pitch. Do you remember our relationship? Still nothing. The silence stretched so long my chest tightened. Then Anne looked up, slowly, and for the first time that night she spoke. Her voice was raw, but steady. Stop asking me that. Ellen didn't blink. She asked again. Do you remember our relationship? Anne exploded. I remember everything. And I cannot wait to expose you, bitch. Her voice cracked, but didn't break. She sounded like someone who had nothing left to lose. But Ellen didn't react. Not to the insult, not to the rage. She simply shifted her weight and said calmly, "What did you tell Twitch?" Anne froze. Completely. Her anger turned into terror in one heartbeat. "Please," she whispered. "He has nothing to do with this. Don't hurt him. I swear, don't." Ellen leaned in. Her voice was ice. "What did you tell him?" That question drained the room of air. For the next 3 hours, she alternated between the same two questions. "Do you remember our relationship? What did you tell Twitch?" Over and over and over. Anne screamed until her voice cracked, then whispered until she couldn't, then just shook, silent tears running down her cheeks. Meanwhile, Ellen never raised her voice, never blinked, never tired. Her patience was the scariest part. My legs were going numb on the crate. My fingers were locked around the vent edge. I didn't dare move, but eventually I had to. A tiny shift, barely anything. The crate made a faint wooden creak. Ellen stopped mid-sentence. Then she turned her head, slow, toward the wall I was behind. She walked toward the vent with the calm confidence of someone checking on a sleeping pet. Then she leaned forward and smelled through the vent. A long, deliberate inhale. My entire body went cold. She didn't speak, didn't call it out, didn't accuse. She just listened to the silence I was barely managing to hold. A long pause. 10 seconds, maybe 30, maybe forever. Then she turned and walked out of the room. No goodbye, no instruction. Just gone. I slid to the floor, legs trembling, lungs burning from holding my breath. I stumbled out of the utility room, out of the wing, out of the building when my shift ended, though I barely remember clocking out. I made it home just after sunrise, closed the blinds, collapsed into bed, but I couldn't sleep. Even in the dim half-light of my room, something felt wrong. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and in the far corner, a figure stood, not moving, not breathing, just watching. The silhouette was unmistakable. Short blonde hair, rigid posture, black eyes, perfect circles of void, staring straight at me. I blinked. The figure didn't disappear. It just stayed, silent, patient, waiting for me to close my eyes first. I didn't sleep at all that day. And that was the moment I realized whatever was happening to Anne Heche wasn't confined to the facility. Ellen could follow you home. And she had. I didn't plan it for long. It was instinct, survival. By then, I knew I wouldn't make it another week if I stayed silent. Not after what I saw through that vent. Not after the shadow that followed me home. Ellen wasn't just interrogating Anne. She was breaking her slowly, methodically, like someone peeling away identity layer by layer until there was nothing left. And if Anne stayed here, she'd disappear the same way everyone else did. That night, I decided to end it. The facility is engineered for order, perfect order. Everything locked, everything silent, everything controlled. But every system has a flaw. At 1:45 a.m., I walked to the wall panel in East Wing, hesitated for one breath, then pulled the fire alarm lever. No sirens, just red strobes exploding across the hallways like veins of light. Staff panicked immediately. They're trained for calm, but they never are. Doors unlocked automatically, monitors shut down, emergency lights snapped to full brightness. Perfect chaos. I ran through the south corridor, past the empty nurse station, toward the far end, room 7, Anne's room. Through the glass window, I saw her, curled on the floor, arms wrapped around herself, the same pale linen gown she'd worn for days, damp from sweat. Her hair stuck to her face, her breathing shallow but alert. When I unlocked the door, she didn't flinch. She didn't even look up. It was like she'd been awake, waiting for this exact moment. "Anne," I whispered, "we don't have time." Her head lifted slowly. Her red-rimmed eyes locked on mine. There was a depth there, Fear, yes, but something else too. Something determined. She stood without hesitation, almost like she already knew I'd come. "Where do I go?" she asked, voice hoarse. "Maintenance corridor," I said. "Left gate is open. Take the stairwell. No cameras, no sensors." She stepped past me, her bare feet slapping softly on the polished floor. But just as she reached the doorway, she stopped. Her hand shot out and gripped my wrist, cold, strong. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Never forget who she is." A warning, a plea, a truth. "She'll make you think you dreamed all of this," she said, "but you didn't." Then she let go and vanished into the corridor. I stayed behind, heart pounding, hands shaking, mind racing. I had to erase everything, any sign of what I'd done. I headed down to the reconciliation chamber, the room where Ellen had spent hours drilling those two questions into Anne's mind. The door was propped open, the lights humming low. Inside, the air felt thick, charged with something wrong. The wall screens were frozen on static-filled frames of Anne's face, distorted, stretched, terrified. I wiped the logbook clean, deleted my entry from the system, erased my ID stamp from the door panel. I unplugged the conditioning machine, unplugged the wall feeds, unplugged everything I could without triggering a lockdown. I was almost finished when the door clicked shut behind me. My blood went cold. She stepped inside like she'd been waiting in the darkness the entire time. Ellen DeGeneres, but not the Ellen the world recognized. Not the one who danced on TV. Not the one who smiled for crowds. This one didn't smile. This one barely breathed. This one filled the room like a shadow stretching over water. Slow, quiet, inevitable. Her eyes flicked around the chamber before settling on me. "You've been busy," she said, voice soft, almost amused. I couldn't answer. My throat locked. Ellen walked further in, hands clasped behind her back like she was giving a tour of a museum she owned. "You think you're helping her?" she asked. "You don't understand. This place isn't about breaking people. It's about fixing memories." I swallowed hard. "She didn't need fixing," I said. My voice barely came out. Ellen tilted her head, studying me. "She told you things, didn't she?" she asked. "Stories about me, about our past, about Twitch." That name froze me. She stepped closer. "You know what happens when people tell the wrong story?" Her lips curled into a hollow smile. "They stop existing." She stopped just 1 foot away, close enough that I could see my own reflection in her eyes. And that's when I realized her eyes weren't right. They were black, completely black, like two holes punched through reality itself. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Do you remember our relationship?" My breath caught. She repeated it. "Do you remember our relationship?" This time, something pulled at me. A pressure at the back of my skull, a flicker of images not my own. Anne screaming, Twitch terrified, Ellen standing over both of them like a judge. I realized then that she wasn't just interrogating, she was removing, replacing, reshaping, pressing her reality into mine. She asked again, "Do you remember our relationship?" I didn't know what answer she wanted, but a voice inside, small and shaking, whispered exactly what I must say. I forced it out. "No." Everything stopped. The humming, the pressure, the pulling. Ellen stepped back. Her black eyes softened, blue returning like nothing had ever changed. She smiled, a satisfied smile. "Good," she murmured. "You're learning." Then she turned, opened the door, and walked out without looking at me once. By the time I made it to the main lobby, firefighters were already there, checking halls, running thermal scans, shouting orders. No fire, no smoke, no cause. "False alarm," one said irritably. "Reset it." Staff were already returning to their stations, but I didn't return to mine. I didn't clock out. I didn't gather my things. I walked straight out the back exit, past the firefighters, past my coworkers, past everything that had kept me quiet. I didn't stop walking until the building became a shadow in my rearview mirror. That was the last night I ever set foot in that place, and the last night I ever slept without fear. I didn't turn on the news for 3 days. I slept in my car the night I left, if you can even call it sleep. I parked at a truck stop somewhere outside the Arizona border and sat there until sunrise, staring at the empty highway, replaying one moment over and over in my head. Do you remember our relationship? No. The answer felt wrong, forced, like I'd given her something I didn't mean to give, just to survive the moment. And yet, it worked. I walked out alive, but something followed me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her silhouette in the corner of my room. Every time a car passed behind me on the highway, I checked the rearview mirror twice. Every time I blinked, I felt the echo of her voice under my skin. 3 days later, while filling up my tank, I opened my phone for the first time since I fled. That's when I saw the headline, Anne Heche, in critical condition after fiery crash. Vehicle erupts in flames in Mar Vista. My breath left my chest. The article said she drove her Mini Cooper into a house, said the fire was intense, said it took nearly an hour to extract her. But the timeline didn't fit. She'd escaped the facility only hours before the crash. No one could move that fast, not in her state, unless she wasn't alone, unless someone intercepted her. I searched for the video, the one circulating everywhere, the helicopter footage. You've probably seen it too. The charred car, the firefighters, the stretcher, the white tarp covering her body, and just as they load her into the ambulance, she sits up, violently, like she was yanked upward by invisible hands. The paramedics jump back. Someone on the helicopter radio lets out a shaky gasp. Anne fights, thrashes, as if she knows this is her last chance to stay alive. She's sedated moments later, and the tarp falls over her face. The clip ends, but my nightmares didn't. I watched that footage dozens of times, looking for something, anything I could understand. Instead, all I kept hearing was her whisper in that hallway. Never forget who she is. Because Anne wasn't trying to escape the crash. She was trying to escape them. The same people who tried to rewrite her mind. The same people who kept clones of high-value individuals below ground. The same people Anne said were building replacements, preparing for when the public needed a more obedient version. And she knew names. She knew faces. She knew the project wasn't small. She knew certain celebrities weren't exactly who we think they are. I remember her voice in the vent chamber, shaking, terrified, whispering, "Who are you people?" Now I understood why. She wasn't just fighting for her truth. She was fighting for her identity. And Ellen was the one trying to take it from her. The reports changed quickly after the crash. At first, they said her condition was stable, then critical, then grave, then brain dead. Her podcast episodes disappeared. Mentions of her upcoming documentary vanished. Her hospital information sealed. Her records scrubbed. 2 days later, the announcement came. Anne Heche passed. But I didn't believe it. Not because I thought she survived, but because everything around her death looked orchestrated, timed, managed, silenced. And then, 4 months later, it happened again. Stephen Twitch Boss, one of the few people Anne trusted, one of the only ones she might have told something to. Someone Ellen kept very, very close. His death made no sense. The motel staff said he didn't seem distressed. Security said they never heard a gunshot. There was no struggle, no note, no footage, no explanation. And yet the headline came, DJ Twitch dies at 40, apparent suicide. But the timeline didn't match the cameras. Something was missing, something was off. Something reminded me of the way Anne's timeline shifted, cleaned up, shaped, corrected. And in the middle of all those reports, all those statements, Ellen stayed completely silent. Not a tweet, not an interview, not a word. It was the quietest she'd ever been, which made the hair on my neck stand up. Because Anne said it first, in that room, in that voice that still echoes in my ears. What did you tell Twitch? And the look on her face when Ellen asked it wasn't guilt. It wasn't fear. It was grief. As if she knew exactly what would happen next. After Twitch died, the signs around me intensified. A black SUV sat outside the laundromat while I folded clothes. An envelope slid under my motel door with no return address. Inside was a single torn Bible page. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. John 1:5. Same verse. Anne's old friend James used to bring up in interviews when talking about Hollywood. No name, no explanation, just the verse. Some nights I caught a reflection in glass. Blonde hair, pale gown, swollen eyes. But when I turned, no one was there. I told myself it wasn't her ghost. I told myself it was memory, but I don't know anymore. People say I'm paranoid. People say I'm imagining this. People say I absorbed too much of Anne's fear, too much of her trauma, but I know what I saw. I know what she whispered to me as she ran barefoot down that hallway. She'll make you think you dreamed all of this. And Ellen could. She had that power. She didn't need to hurt you, didn't need to chase you. She just needed you to forget, to lose the thread, to question yourself, to rewrite your own memories until hers were the only version left. That's why I left. That's why I've been hiding. And that's why I wrote this down. Because Anne remembered. Twitch remembered. And now they're both gone. So I'll ask you, the only people left to hear this, do you believe Ellen DeGeneres had something to do with their deaths? Tell me in the comments, before this video disappears too.